Hey guys, welcome to GothCast. I'm Dr. Sanders, and today I'm taking a look at the two Batcave compilation albums from 1983. If you watched my previous video, the history of the Batcave, I did mention these briefly, but I think that they deserve their own look. So we're going to talk about Young Limbs and Numb Hymns and The Whip. Alright, so first off I'm going to be talking about Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. Now I think a lot of people may be familiar with this one. If you search the Batcave, or you know the song Sex Beat by the band Sex Beat, or Meat of Youth, this is where those songs come from initially. And it's a pretty good album. In the liner notes and the fold out gatefold, which is really cool, John Klein from Specimen actually did the artwork for this. It talks about how these 9 songs are the anthems for the people of the Batcave. Not the sad, depressed, it basically talks about it. It's pretty cool what they put in. And I think that this album really is that. It's an album of anthems for the goth subculture. And probably the first one that was ever specifically made for that. And I think it's really interesting in that way. Okay, probably the two most popular bands on here are going to be Specimen and Alien Sex Fiend, who are credited as the Specimen and the Alien Sex Fiend. That's the only time I know that the Alien Sex Fiend, is called that. But then the Specimen is actually pretty common. That Specimen, although things like the Batastrophe EP have it as Specimen, and most people will call the band Specimen, a lot of the press, a lot of the reviews at the time actually called them the Specimen. So it seems like even they had a bit of time before they dropped the word "the" from the beginning of the band. But you also have a lot of really obscure artists, and you have even some weird one-off bands, which I'll talk about in just a second when I transition to comparing these albums. But of course, if you know the song Meat of Youth or Sex Beat, which is a very, very popular goth anthem that's been covered by lots of different people, that's where this comes from. Sex Beat was originally on this album, and Meat of Youth and all that sort of stuff. The art is really cool, and I think it really helped when it went to different places kind of evoke the image of goth, the bats and everything like that. And if you pull up the album, it says the Batcave, and it has the little bat logo. And then you also have what I think is really funny when I bought this album is it comes with the home taping is killing music, which is obviously people don't really do that anymore. They don't listen to a vinyl record and then copy it to a cassette, or copy cassette to give to somebody anymore. So it's kind of a cool remnant of the 80s and 90s. Just imagine if they had heard of the internet and what that would do to music. It's kind of funny. But I really like this album. It is, kind of spotty in some ways in terms of the quality of the writing, I will say. While you have these amazing songs, especially Specimen's Dead Man's Auto Chop, I think that's one of the best songs Specimen ever did. You do have these really random ones like Shock Work by Test Department, and Test Department was a band that had actually done quite a few things, but I don't really like the song on this album. It's just kind of noisy and doesn't really come together for me. It just doesn't connect with me. But then when you have Meat of Youth, with the song Meat of Youth, the song's amazing. One of the best songs I've heard from that time. And Brilliant, who is actually a pretty interesting band in their own right, they only ever did one album, but those songs are the quality tracks on here. I feel like a lot of it sounds a little bit similar, like they were trying to go for a definitive sound on this album for the Batcave, although it is varied in some ways. Most of it comes from that sort of more punk side of goth, a little bit noisier, which I know a lot of people like that. And while they are anthems, I really feel like they are trying to be anthems. Some of them just do better than other songs on here. I will say that the last song on side 2, The Dance of Death by the Venomettes, which is actually a group of violinists who went on to do tons and tons of different things and work at The Cure, and so you see the Banshees and the Philharmonic Orchestra, and we're going to see them pop up in some other album reviews that I have planned. But I love how it ends. It just is a beautiful piece, and I really like that. For this particular album, Young Limbs and Numb Hymns, it was not released on anything else besides cassette. Today it is not on CD. As far as I can tell, it hasn't been released on CD. but a lot of these songs have been released on other compilations or different things like that. You know, I know Specimen has had Azoic, which is the compilation album of their songs, and I'm pretty sure it includes Dead Man's Auto Chop, and I know Sex Beat's been included on some different goth compilations and Meat of Youth. So the songs for the most part are out there, but the ones that are really strange, like PATTI PALLADIN's song, and she went to go work with Johnny Thunders on a ton of stuff, but her song, which is one of her only solo songs as far as I can think of for like at least a long time, The Nun's New Clothes, is an interesting song and, you know, deserves to be heard. But this is pretty much, I think, one of the only ways to hear it, unless she has some compilation I'm not aware of. So would I recommend Young Limbs and Numb Hymns? Yes. But first let me talk about and compare it to the other one that was released the same year, and it's kind of strange that basically two Batcave compilations came out within the same year. I think this one came out in March, and I'm not sure when Young Limbs and Numb Hymns came out. But I feel like the whip has gone strangely under the radar as opposed to Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. And I'm not sure what the reason for that is. I think that if you're looking at the atmosphere of the Batcave and the sort of, you know, darker gothic look and sound for goth, what people would call the more trad goth sound, I think you're gonna find that on Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. But I like the whip a lot because that sounds kind of weird. I like the whip a lot, but I like it a lot because it has a huge variation in sound from all the artists, and it seems like it's having a lot more fun in a way than Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. You have these very strange kind of collaborations between artists and kind of breaking off a little bit. And if you like Sex Gang Children, the band, then you'll probably be interested to know that Dave Sex Gang, you know, Dave Roberts from that band, the bassist, not only has his own solo song on here, but he basically kind of arranged this album and kind of brought it to life. But you also have Andy Sex Gang working with Mark Allman on this. It's just really interesting. But you do have some overlapping bands between both compilations, which is kind of interesting. They're almost like a pair, you know, that they go together in that way. You have a song by Brilliant on both of them. That is the band by Youth, the bassist for Killing Joke after he left. Actually on the whip he's credited as Youth, Y-O-O-F, which is really funny. Seemed like he was kind of taking a jab at himself. You have The Damned on here. Dave Vanian did a solo song for this. And while it doesn't really have like any lyrics, it's mostly him just kind of doing these weird vocal noises. He does include a song by Naz Nomads and the Nightmares, which is actually a Damned side project that they had done to basically do some garage covers. It's really strange, but yeah, it's called Naz Nomads and the Nightmares. Now, the reason I was actually holding off on going in depth with Meat of Youth is I know most people are familiar with the song Meat of Youth by the band Meat of Youth, but there's not much else on that. Well, the band is actually comprised of two members of UK Decay, it's a great band, and the bassist of Furio, and the vocalist too. And so these three guys basically formed a band called Meat of Youth to do that song, and then on this album, same guys, and they wrote the song Slave Drive. And of course, Slave Drive, they had to name after their band, Slave Drive. Just like they did Meat of Youth as a band and then called it the song Meat of Youth, they formed a band called Slave Drive, which is essentially the same band, and then made a song called Slave Drive. So that's pretty funny that they basically are the same group, but you wouldn't know it unless you actually did some research. Honestly, one of my favorite songs off this album is actually from Brigandage with the song Hide and Seek. I really like this song, and I think it's really underrated. It's just so good. And actually, Brigandage is kind of an underrated band in its own way, and actually was pretty involved with the Batcave for a little while. One of the reasons I think this album is really interesting is these sort of interstitials or random songs kind of thrown in here. Not only do you have the strange Dave Vanian Damned thing at the beginning of side 2, but you also have Matthew Best, who's this drummer for Psychic TV, playing a piano part. And then you have a Weedabricks, which is a cereal. You have a commercial for that partway through side 2. That's like a jingle for it. Just randomly. think it's unfortunate that this album, as it stands, has not been released in this form. In fact, you can find this album on CD. It's, it's titled The Whip. I think it was released around 2000. But it doesn't have all the material. In fact, the kind of more entertaining stuff on it, like the interstitials, and I think some of the songs have been cut, and then you have like a few things like Rosetta Stone added to it, which are good songs, but it kind of took away from what this album does. And I think it represents the Batcave pretty well in that it's a variety of different things. And while it doesn't have as many anthems and as many catchy songs as Young Limbs and Numb Hymns, and doesn't necessarily represent the goth or trad goth or 80s goth or post-punk sound as well as that album, I think it represents the variety that the Batcave had in terms of an audience and in terms of people being creative. I also don't think that the art for this album is as interesting as Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. It is cool, with the hand, sort of evil hand and the giant nail. There is also a red and orange version of this and a gray version. I have the pink nail version, but the art just doesn't really click with me in the same way that the sort of collage of goth that the other album has. Alright, maybe wondering what album do I think is better between these two, and I have to say I kind of enjoy The Whip a little bit more. Kind of sounds weird saying that, but yeah, I do like some a little bit more. It's a little more soft, a little more experimental than Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. But I think what it really comes down to is I think the songwriting for the songs on The Whip is better. I do still really enjoy Young Limbs and Numb Hymns, and I think it represents the club really well and the spirit of it. But I think as just an album outside of that, I think The Whip is better. Like I said, you can pick up these albums in different ways. Unfortunately, going the CD route as far as The Whip I've seen is a little expensive, and like I said, it doesn't have the same songs on it that the original album does, the vinyl copy of it. And as far as Young Limbs and Numb Hymns, the only real way to get it, outside of finding somebody who's transferred it, is the vinyl record or the cassette. And as far as I know, it hasn't been released on CD, and any CDs that do exist are bootlegs. But I encourage you to listen to the music on these and kind of look at those hidden gems that are only on here. A lot of these from the first album are really well known, Meat of Youth and Sex Beat. But I really encourage The Whip for those obscure songs, and Sexting Children on here is pretty good. So that is my review of the two Batcave compilation albums. Two albums I think really represent what the Batcave was about. One a lot more anthemy and a lot more well known, but hopefully people give The Whip a chance, if you know what I mean. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to be taking another look at something from the Batcave really soon, and I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and of course, stay spooky.